Hey, Mike. Hey, Warren.
Hey, Louise.
Hello,
How are you?
Louise. How are you?
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy
Happy
New
New
Year.
Year.
New Year.
We are on YouTube now, so we're
Okay.
broadcasting.
All righty. I think we have everyone here tonight, right?
Minus Mr. Wyant, but that
Well,
we knew
yeah.
was coming.
Crazy day today, right?
Very
In the
busy.
world.
How about it?
And
Everybody.
continuing.
Yeah.
I have a nephew who is in the National Guard in Maryland. Unfortunately, he's vacationing at Vail. So
Oh, so he didn't have to get called in there. That's good.
he was
You're
called.
sure that's unfortunate?
Oh,
My son almost immediately he texted his mother to tell him he is fine. He's had a clinic in the morning and then was at home.
oh,
Was
good.
that
I
Warren?
tell you before you even ask, Mom.
Oh,
That's good to hear.
where is he, Warren?
He's at George Washington University Hospital
That's right. Oh, boy.
right downtown.
I think, Greg, are you joining us by phone? I don't see any video for you.
No, I'm just on, I don't have video access on this computer,
Oh, okay. All right, good. So you're on. Okay.
Yep. but my voice is current.
That's good.
You're looking good, Louise.
Yeah, right. I survived.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You feeling okay?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, all good. Well, it is 6:30. Mike, if you want to put the flag up. Okay, will everyone please rise to pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is Jim going to take roll call?
I certainly will.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Acker,
Here.
Mr. Azar,
Here.
Dr. Cadman.
Here.
Mr. Fleming.
Here.
Mr. Madinsky,
Here.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Here.
All right. Mr. Robeson,
Here.
Mrs. Tierney,
Here.
and Mrs. Brushalski.
Here.
Everyone's here.
Yep. Very good. Okay, Dr. Mann, you want to start with the superintendent's report? Mike, I think you're muted.
Okay. Now I hope everyone can see my screen and hear me at this point. I want to begin first by noting that tonight is January School Board Appreciation Month. And if ever there was a year to be appreciative to a board for this board or actually any board, this is the year. It has been an enormous challenge. Board members, volunteer members of the community representing the community have taken on very significant loads, making types of decisions that never they would have envisioned. And so I just want to express on behalf of the school district our gratitude to our Board of Education. So tonight I have 5 topics I'd like to cover. First, an update on COVID in the school district. Secondly, and related, is the topic of winter sports. We have a motion on the agenda tonight for that. I have one slide on Keystone exams, few slides on the comprehensive plan, and I will conclude by a few words on the budget, which we have a motion that we typically have on the agenda for tonight. So to begin with the COVID update, positive cases of COVID and close contacts continue to increase. We are, however, having significant efforts to do contact tracing, to reduce the possibility of asymptomatic spread in school buildings. In the past 2 weeks, just prior to the holiday, we've had to quarantine 122 individuals, students and staff. Of those 122 quarantined, 19 were positive cases and 103 were close contacts. And I will say that staffing is an issue. On Monday, we actually had the central office secretaries on call, and they were going to be heading to the buildings to provide supervision to classrooms where teachers were teaching from home. I have to say, while I never look forward to a snowstorm coming, I was a bit relieved when it did, when we had Monday off because of the snow, because at least on Monday, we were about as tight as we have been in light of the number of individuals that we have quarantined. However, in spite of all this, right, there remains no evidence whatsoever of COVID passing from students to staff, and that is the good news. Abington Heights, and I want to reiterate this is something that we've mentioned a number of times before at our board meetings. We are obligated to follow the Pennsylvania Department of Education guidelines regarding school closures. And this guidance triggers closures at our elementary schools when there's 2 to 4 positive cases, and when there's 6 to 10 positive cases at our middle school and high school. And those closures range in the guidance from 3 days up to 14 days. Right. And I've pasted here a quote that comes directly from the guidance. And the quote says, obviously, if case investigations, contact tracing, and cleaning and disinfecting can be accomplished in a faster time frame, the length of closure time may be shortened. And so the key that this tells us is the purpose of closing. It was not to close for the sake of closing, but rather to allow time for case investigations, time for contact tracing, and for cleaning and disinfecting. And so Abington Heights, as we have said from the very beginning, is committed to transparency, right? And we have posted online, and everyone has seen this, each and every quarantine because of a close contact or isolation, really, in the event of a positive case. They're all there, all since the beginning of the break, since actually the first day we stepped back in school. Now, Mrs. Tierney actually raised this question during the week, very excellent question, and that is, at times, it may appear that district buildings are open when they should be closed, and at other times, the buildings are closed when case counts indicate they should be open. And I say this, in other words, someone may look at the sheet that we have posted online, and they may count up the number of, say, positive cases over a 14-day rolling period and say, well, we should be closed now, but yet this building is open. And in some instances, we've actually have been closed when the case numbers have not been that high, right? And so I reiterate, the purpose of building closures is to perform case investigations, contact tracing, and cleaning. But nevertheless, this is an excellent question. Again, Mrs. Tierney did raise it, but she was not the only one. I'd like to take just a moment to speak to the board about how we actually do this, okay? So I want to begin by looking at the definition from the Department of Health of when a person is considered infectious. And so for COVID, a close contact, and this is what we do, we find close contacts, is defined as any individual who was within 6 feet of an infected person for at least 15 minutes. And here's the key, starting from 2 days before illness onset, or for asymptomatic patients 2 days prior to a positive specimen collection until the time the patient is isolated. So as we do contact tracing, we must consider the the status or the circumstances surrounding the individual who tested positive. And as we identify close contacts, we look back 2 days from before the illness has come on, or 2 days prior to the positive test. And that's important for a reason, which I hope to explain a little better in the next slide. And so I have an example here where someone will go to the website and they'll see that an elementary school has 3 cases of COVID. The guidance calls for the building to be closed, anything over 2, yet the building remains open, and the person would very fairly ask, well, why is the building open? So here's the explanation, and this is something that is actually fairly common. But of those 3 cases, of those 3 positive cases, well, case 1, the student was positive and potentially an asymptomatic transmitter of COVID. A very big concern for us. We will do contact tracing, and it was very possible that the student was contagious while in the building. So that would be one case, heading up to the 2. However, in the second case of these 3, the student attended on Monday and Tuesday. She was asymptomatic, but tested positive on Saturday. And so when a student tests positive, we have to go back 2 days. If we go back 2 days from Saturday, of course, we have Friday and Thursday. And because we're in the hybrid model, the last day this student was in school was on Tuesday. So as a result, even though this individual was clearly positive, there was never a day that this student was actually in school at a time when they were contagious, when they could have spread the COVID asymptomatically. So as a result, there is no contact tracing for us to do. There is no case investigation, and there is no cleaning because of this individual case, because there's not in school during that time. And then in case number 3, of the 3 cases here, the student attended on Thursday and Friday. He became ill on the following Wednesday and remained home, as the parents nearly always responsibly do. And the student tested positive on Friday. And so if we go back to the guidance, the student became ill on Wednesday. All right. If you count back 2 days, all right, they attended on Thursday, right? So that was actually the previous week. They remained home. They were not in school then on Thursday and not in school on Friday. So while this is a positive case posted on our website, it is not a positive case when it comes to counting toward the 2 cases that would actually trigger a building closure. And so let me now go to example number 2. And this actually happened. Abington Heights High School is closed on a Monday. The district's public COVID document reports 3 positive cases, indicating the school is being closed unnecessarily. So the guidance says we have to get to 6. We've only hit 3. So someone would very reasonably ask, well, why did you close the building? So in this particular instance, administration learns of a positive case on Sunday. Our principals, particularly our director of HR, Megan Buck, are constantly receiving reports and working on contact tracing, definitely over every weekend now. The initial contact tracing, as we're working on this on a Sunday, indicates several potential close contacts, including staff members who work in close proximity to students. There is insufficient time to complete the case investigations and to quarantine the close contacts as the clock is ticking into Sunday evening. So in this case, while we were not mandated to close, we were completely unsatisfied that we had reached every potential close contact. We were uncertain that individuals who could have been associated with this incident would potentially come to school and be asymptomatic spreaders. And so we ended up closing school on Monday, not because we had to with the guidance, but because to be faithful of the spirit of the guidance, we were not finished with our case investigations. We were not finished in quarantining close contacts. And therefore, it was appropriate for us, we believe, to close the school, even though the public sheet that we looked at, that we have posted, indicated that we could have been open. And so that really, this is a slide I very happily put in a little late this afternoon, but finally, at long last, the 499 Chromebooks are being distributed starting tomorrow to the families who need it. 475 will be in later this week. And so my thought is within a week, 2 at the most, everyone who has needed a Chromebook and has signed up will be able to receive one. Obviously, I thank the board for their support and their patience in financing this, but also for their patience and understanding that because of the pandemic and issues beyond our control, it took a while to get there. I do want to publicly thank Chris Suma and his staff who over the holiday prepared all of the Chromebooks for distribution. So perhaps I will pause to see if there are any questions before we move on to our next topic.
Mike, this is Greg Madinsky. I just have a quick comment. I think your analysis of your examples of differences on how you handle each situation is very, very important. I can tell you from my standpoint of where I work, we have taken a very, very conservative approach. We have lengthened people's quarantines just to be on the safe side. I believe you're doing it the best way possible. It is case by case, and each case is different. You're analyzing them. The timing of those information when you find out is very critical, and you're taking a very conservative approach to keeping everybody else safe. So I guess my comment is I just want to commend you. I think you're doing a very good job of the tracing and how you're handling, because each situation will be different. And I know sometimes that is very difficult to understand, but I think a lot of companies are in the same situation, school districts, and I want to commend you for how you're approaching the whole situation. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Mr. Vedic. That's very kind. And I really must convey that our administrative team is working all hours to try to do their very best to keep our students safe. And the contact tracing has risen to the top of our efforts to make sure that our buildings are in good shape. And to the point of taking a conservative approach, the amount of time for quarantine had been 14 days. It has been reduced to 10, but our Secretary of Health said the more protective approach is to keep it at 14. And we have continued to maintain the 14-day rather than the 10-day requirement. It's an open question for us to consider, but when we hear the most protective is the 14 days, we've, at least up until this point, decided to stay with that number.
Dr. May and Michelle Tierney, I also, like Greg, want to commend administration, yourself, for the hard work that you're doing to continue to take the safety first of our faculty and students. My question is, with all of the faculty that was out at the high school on Monday and we had a snow day, what happened on Tuesday? And at what point do you say that there isn't enough faculty or enough substitutes to cover faculty, so the building has to be closed? Does that ever have to happen?
Well, yes, and we were as close as we have ever been on Monday. Now, I want to emphasize that in many cases, I think certainly most, and perhaps the vast majority of cases, teachers who are home are actually teaching from home, including the students who are in. So students will come into their classroom and students at home will log in as they always do. And the class will go on. The issue we face is that we're very uncomfortable leaving any classes unattended. And while the students in there will certainly do a good job, we like to have a body in the classroom, even because the teacher is not physically present teaching from home. It's always a good practice to try to have people in the classroom. And so that would have been the role and responsibility of our central office secretaries, for example, on Monday, if it came to that. Now, we're always on a 14-day rolling period, and every day we have some people coming off and being able to report back to work. And as of late, every day we're having people going on into the quarantine status. And it just happens that Monday was a bad day for us, and we may end up having some bad days in the near and intermediate future. I hope it doesn't come down to having to close the district for a day or two, but I think the board should be aware and the community should be aware that it's certainly a possibility. And we've been asking all along people to try to be flexible and realize that we're doing the very, very best we can to get kids in school, which we recognize is critically important, but to do it in a way that is safe and is reasonable when it comes to our levels of staffing.
Oh, thank you.
Mike, what about vaccines for teachers and staff? Have you been notified of any of them?
I'm happy to say with some of the advocacy of our nurses and with the help of Dr. Jignesh Sheth, who is on our committee, the health committee, many might remember him, our nurses are being vaccinated this week. What good news, right? That it has started. And we have not been contacted formally about how it could expand into our teaching staff. Certainly, right, our teachers and our support staff continue to work closely with kids. As I've said in the past, they toilet them. They have to restrain them on rare occasion. They are, very close, in very close proximity to them. So teachers need to get this vaccine. And in so doing, it will really allow us to keep our building open. So we anxiously await that time, but I'm very pleased to report that the process has at least begun with some of our most at-risk individuals, our nurses.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to another very, very important topic, and that is the topic of winter sports. To give an update, and the board will recall all of this. Conditioning and practices have continued since early December. All indications point toward players and coaches making conscientious efforts to stay as safe as possible. I truly have been impressed in all of my observations with the sincerity that this effort is being approached by both our coaches and our players. Since we got back started up with conditioning practices, we did have 2 potentially asymptomatic students participate in conditioning practices. There were no close contacts as expected. And that was the whole premise to our conditioning practices, that we would be able to maintain appropriate social distancing so that we would not have to identify close contacts. And in those cases, while unfortunate for the individuals involved, had no implications or ramifications beyond the 2 people. The start of interscholastic competition has been delayed by the superintendents of the Lackawanna League until January 21st. So the regular games against other schools will start on January 21st. And the truth of it is now that if Abington Heights is to compete at the level expected of our teams, it is necessary to transition to practices that no longer require social distancing at all times. And Monday is the very latest for that transition to take place. If we are going to participate, we expect to win. And to win, we must be ready, we must be prepared. And if we are envisioning going to play sports, we are going to have to right now, ratchet up the level of practice so that we're ready for those competitions. So, very fair to say, what has changed since the fall as the board considers this? And the major thing, and this is not a surprise to anyone, right? There has been a change since the fall in the level of community transmission. Back before the fall season was getting ready to start, we had an incident rate of 11.4 and a positivity rate of 1.5. We fast forward to the week prior to the holiday, the incident rate is up to 332.1 and 13.5% for the positivity rate. And again, we would be negligent in not considering this as we go forward. This data is out there. It has to be part of the analysis that goes into whether we participate or not. But what else has changed? And and this is this paragraph is the best news in the presentation, right? It has become clearer and clearer that schools are not sources of transmission. Mitigation efforts have been successive, have been effective, and while the risk of transmission is real, right? Schools have been doing an excellent job. It has been shown time again that schools are not a cause of transmission. And this presentation will be posted. The board has this document, Schools and the Path to Zero, but it's probably one of the best documents that we've read to say that, look, there is danger, right? There are concerns, there are no guarantees, but if you recall in the fall, I myself, speaking for myself alone, was very concerned about a case from an athletic competition finding its way into school and then spreading through the school rapidly. And one of the major justifications of holding off on contact sports in the fall was the impact of spread in the buildings. And we found that, in our own observations and in the research, that rapid spread or transmission through schools has not been happening. Also, since the fall, our mitigation efforts, including mask wearing, social distancing, and as I spoke about before, contact tracing, have been effective, right? Not foolproof, not perfect, but I will say that I'm very proud of everyone, and the students, the staff, the administration, the community, for their support and their conscientious adherence to our social distancing. Parents are extremely conscientious about calling schools, asking kids, keeping kids home, keeping us posted. We've tried to be very transparent about it. And I will tell you this, we were not at this level coming off, our starting day in October. So we've been better at, and we've learned a lot in mitigation efforts. And I think that we have been effective, all right? I added this one, I debated whether I would or not, but the Department of Health, the Department of Education, the governor are no longer recommending against interscholastic sports. But we really have never put a lot of weight in those recommendations because they change and they're qualified, and but nevertheless, I'm not aware of any mandate that interscholastic sports or even recommendations not take place. And in fact, while they did mandate they be closed over the holidays, that mandate has been lifted. And then also, I think it's fair to note on the concerning side that fall sports are indoors, increasing the risk of transmission over outdoor sports. And we know that transmission through the fall has been very limited during actual competition, although there's more common, there are greater evidence of spread in sports for indoor sports. And I placed a link to a Policy Lab update from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia that kind of supports the information in that bullet. And so what will be the next steps, all right? If we decide we're moving forward. So interscholastic winter sports in the current environment is a close call. I will make, in my mind, as I've been thinking about this, there are very good reasons to participate, and there are equally good reasons to be concerned about moving forward. If approved, contact practices will begin no later than Monday, the 11th. If we're approved to move forward, administration will meet with all coaches prior to the start of contact practices and emphasize the importance of all aspects of prevention, but especially the importance of full and prompt cooperation with the district's contact tracing process. If a student is sick, if a student is not feeling well, if they have a positive test, we have every reason to believe that they will be open and honest about it, but that is an extreme point of emphasis that we will take up with our coaches prior to practice if allowed. Right? And I want to thank Mr. Azar for putting us on this path to consider. But if we do approve sports, all athletes will be required to sign what we're going to be calling a winter promise that outlines the responsibility to keep themselves, their teammates, and their classmates, as well as their families, I should have there, safe. And, you know, we are going to be very clear to say that coaches can include penalties, being reprimanded, being benched, even up to with the consultation of administration being removed to the team if athletes decide that they do not want to live up to these obligations. And we're very serious about this. We hope the board would be supportive of our very serious, how seriously we will take students who are non-compliant with keeping themselves and others safe. And again, we're working on the language, but I do want to thank Mr. Azar for his suggestion there. And finally, if approved, just because, well, we're playing doesn't mean we're going to continue to play if circumstances require a suspension. And so rest assured that if we do move ahead, if we find positive cases, certainly instances of transmission, we will be able to suspend the activity or at bare minimum quarantine team members whenever is necessary. And so given that, I was very clear in making the recommendation in the fall to halt contact sports. I think the board is owed a recommendation from the superintendent, and while I will emphasize it is a close call and very thoughtful and valid arguments can be made on both sides, I would like to proceed in giving winter sports a try, given all the caveats that we discussed. So at this point, I think maybe we should pause again and see if there are any questions or discussion among board members.
Michelle Tierney, I have a question on the winter promise, outlining responsibilities to keep themselves safe. Is it possible to put in that promise that they will only, during their season, use the Abington Heights facilities to practice instead of going on all these travel teams or possibly Riverfront or whatnot, and making that part of the actual written out responsibilities, so everyone is understanding that, you know, it could possibly be transmitted from an outside source coming into our athletes. So could that be possibly part of the promise?
Yes, Mrs. Tierney, if that's not number one, it's very near number one on what we envision to be the list of expectations. Our feeling is that if you feel the need to play AAU sports at some local facility, that's fine for you, but don't come here and play. We are that clear about it, because it is that type of thing that could be our undoing. And what I will say is, I mean, the athletes want to play. They've devoted their life to it. Their coaches want them to play. And I think this will be welcomed, actually, if we move forward with it. And to the extent that people, in the rare case that somebody flaunts it, I think no tears will be shed in having that person not on the team anymore.
Okay,
Mike,
thank
this is Greg Madinsky. Are we having the parents sign this document also, besides the students?
Yes, Mr. Madinsky, there'll be a line for the parents and a line for the student athlete.
Okay, and then the second, I have a comment. I just have a question for the rest of the board members, and I know everybody's been reading a lot of the emails we get, but is this something, and it's just another, you know, conservative approach of trying to mitigate risk. Do we, you know, have to make the athletes go virtual while they're participating? I mean, I'm thinking about that. I don't have a decision in my own mind. I just was hoping that could get some more input from the other board members, that here are students that want to participate in contact sports, but try to keep the teachers and the other students safer, kind of limiting their access to them, I guess, by having them go virtual.
Right.
Just a topic for conversation.
Right. And Mr. Madinsky, first, I've heard that perhaps that is being posed to athletes in some other places. And I know you addressed it to the board, but I do want to offer that would be about the only thing that I would say we really should avoid. I say that because we're setting up a choice for students to either play sports or participate in school, even if it's voluntary. There would be a very strong pressure for individuals to decide to follow through and not participate in school. And among our athletes, there are those who receive special services, who receive treatments and therapies, and for us to set up that type of choice would really be denying them something that is very, very important to them, and something that we are very much obligated to provide. And so I would think that if we rise to the level of concern that a condition of participating in sports would be to keep our athletes home, then I think that would trigger really the decision not to have winter sports, in my view.
Thank you for that. I never thought of that aspect of it. Thank you.
Dr. Mann and Greg, I would agree with you, Dr. Mann. I think our primary purpose here is to make sure our students have the opportunity for the best education we can provide. Obviously, sports are important, and certainly I'm in favor of moving forward with sports, but in reality, what we're supposed to be doing here is making sure that they have the opportunity to learn. And to say, if you want to play sports, then that has to be more important than education, I think it's just the wrong approach.
I agree with you, Warren.
Dr. Mann, it's Mike Fleming. I've got a question. We spent a lot of time talking about sports, which is important, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't also discuss other organizations and activities such as orchestra, choir, band, and other clubs. How do they relate to the winter promise and the approval of activities going forward?
Right. They're not up here because there's no interscholastic component or few, but in talking to Mr. Snyder and the high school staff, they are completely involved in the conversation. They have been informed that when we have since stopped in-person meetings for clubs and activities, and if and when these practices are reauthorized, then our clubs and our activities will be getting back in. So this, while we're not talking about it at the board meeting tonight, all of our clubs and activities are being fully considered and will be, if approved tonight, be also increasing their level of interaction, as a result of this board's decision. So very clearly, I will tell you that great things are happening with our clubs and our activities. Our music, we had some fantastic virtual concerts earlier. And so the high school is alive with great activities beyond athletics. And we would anticipate seeing an uptick in those activities as we would perhaps see an uptick in athletics.
Do you have an estimated time when they can get back together?
At the same time, I think they're going to have the same conversation. The principals that will be talking to the coaches about the importance of contact tracing. We'll be having simultaneous conversations with the activity moderators. And I could see no later than Monday for all involved to be back up to full speed, with potentially having people up to speed as early as tomorrow or Friday.
Okay, great, thank you.
This is Jean Cadman. Sports and extracurriculars aside, what discussions are taking place about getting the students back full time?
Well, at this point, Ms. Cadman, we are not in a position to be able to bring students back full time, particularly because the hybrid model with respect to contact tracing has been so helpful to us, because absent that time or span that students are out of school, we would actually have our buildings closed, I think, all the time. And so going back, I think at this point to 5 days per week would be self-defeating in the fact that so many of our people would be in quarantine because they'd be deemed to be close contacts. We are under constant discussion and planning for trying to get students back 5 days per week. We run into a couple problems with, tomorrow we could bring students back 5 days per week if we eliminated all of the virtual the manning requirements, the staffing requirements for being all virtual. But we recognize that's not possible at this time. And we also see that, we're having a very hard time staffing our classrooms as they are. But my thought is that once the vaccine, let's just hope, right? Let's hope that the vaccine has a very positive impact on community transmission, that our teachers are vaccinated, so we're not losing them as a result of quarantine. Then I think there will come a point where we say, look, we're going to invite people back 5 days per week. We may not be able to accommodate as well as we have those who are virtual, but when the time comes and conditions are right, we'll be ready to go back.
Mike, it's Rod Azar. Could you talk a little bit about the superintendent's meeting and some of the precautions that you discussed taking place at some of the sporting events?
Yes, I think probably the primary precaution it is rare. I don't even know if ever the superintendents have really met to talk about leagues and how to proceed. Usually that's left to the principals and the athletic directors, but given the severity of the circumstance, the superintendents have actually been meeting regularly in an effort to make sure that the right steps are taken. We believe we receive no guidance from Harrisburg on masks, if you can believe it, right? They will not tell us if we must or must not have masks during a basketball game. They're very quick to say Penn State didn't need to wear masks in their football games, but they leave us in the lurch. And so in light of the fact that our board presidents have signed attestations about masking, the superintendents have said that we are going to ask that all athletes during practice and competition wear their masks. We've also pushed back the season until January 21st to allow some time for after the holidays for people to, kind of get a sense to them. What we have really said that we're not going to do, and there's the District 2 PIAA called a meeting tomorrow of the athletic directors. And one of the things that we said to ourselves is that, we're not going to be rushed or pushed into doing things too early or too rapidly or too hastily because of some artificial deadline that's set by a district playoff game or a state qualify or whatever it happens to be. So our approach and our message to the District 2 PIAA and the state PIAA is for them to find ways to provide the maximum amount of flexibility to allow for the highest degree of participation while respecting that teams will have their seasons interrupted. Teams will miss games. In the case of wrestling, there may not be interdistrict or other types of meets that might qualify for some districts. And so our message and hope is that the PIAA will be responsive to those requests, which may not be universally shared in other regions or other places. But I don't know, Mr. Azar, I could be missing some that we discussed, but I hope I hit on the big points.
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
Dr. Mann, one quick question. What have the superintendents talked or discussed about attendance at competitions, i.e. are there going to be any fans in the stands or families or?
Yes, there's been a lot of conversation and I chose not to put it up, but I actually have charts of how many, essentially we are allowed 10% of capacity for any type of indoor activity. And when you look at our high school gym, for example, capacity is just a little above 1,000. So a fair number to look at for 10% capacity is 100. And when you look through, I actually happen to have it here. When you look through the actual numbers of participants in a boys basketball game, for example, there are 40 athletes, 7 coaches, trainers, potentially 40 cheerleaders, 20 from each team, and that brings you up to 100. So in the case of a boys basketball game, we may not be able to have fans at all. In the case of a wrestling match. We think the number is more aligned with about 45 participants on both teams, coaches and like, which would give us the opportunity to have perhaps 2 tickets for each home meet. But to your question about how is it working, right? There was really not, we wanted to agree on everything, but there were different approaches and different ideas. And in the end, we decided to leave it up on a case-by-case basis to the athletic directors who were playing each other. And so if you know, take Abington Heights and North Pocono, right? It may be that each individual on both teams would get 1 ticket when the game is at Abington Heights and 1 ticket when it's at North Pocono. It may be that when the game is at Abington Heights gets 2 tickets and North Pocono gets 0. And so those are issues that will be worked through on a case-by-case basis based upon the preference and desires of each district. The athletic directors are going to be charged with working that through, but the cap that we're keeping is 100 people in our gym at any given time. And in some cases that is consumed by the number of participants. I will also say that we're working very diligently and we anticipate to have webcasting in place in the gym so that if parents are unable or relatives or family members unable to get there, they will be able to access and watch the game from home, which is not as good as being there, but it would be better than not being able to watch it at all.
Refs will be happy.
Right.
Thank you.
Superintendent Mann, this is Phil. Around the winter promise, and I know everybody's entering in this with good faith, of course, but what's the operational governance around the winter promise? You know, who's the judge and jury?
Right. That's a good question, Mr. Robeson. Our coaches, right, are empowered. You know, each have team rules. Everyone signs books. You know, an agreement prior to this about rules and conduct and the student athlete policies that we have in place. And so, you know, I would look at akin to, like, say, missing a practice, right? We don't have a district consequence when a student misses a practice without cause, right? Each coach will be able to look at an individual case and either, you know, reprimand a student, sit the student out for a game, and then once it gets beyond, you know, that type of a thing, we ask coaches to consult with administration to make sure that we're being, you know, as fair as possible across the board without, you know, too finely dictating the response that really should be in the hands of a coach. And so we intend to approach this in the same way. And, you know, there is some concern about consistency, but the reality is we think it's best handled by the coaches. And to the extent that the consequence being contemplated is significant, then we will ask our coaches to consult with the administration so that we have a district level view of consistency.
All right, very good. And just another note, you know, in reading a lot of the emails from parents and students, I give a lot of credit to them because they've been asked to do certain things and work within certain constraints. And I believe they've done everything that they've been asked to do with success. And so it's a credit to them. And I appreciate their patience. And I think your plan is a good one. The one concern I had around governance of the winter promise has been addressed. So I really hope that this works. I really do. Thanks.
Yes. Right. Thank you, Mr. Robeson.
So, Dr. Mann, what is the guidelines we're going to try to follow as to when you would not attend a game or, you know, pause the season, miss a game or two? Because I'm all in favor of the kids not missing out on any opportunities, whether it's academic or extracurricular or athletic. But first and foremost, I don't want it to interrupt their education opportunities.
Right, right. And you know, one of the dilemmas we face is that there is an absence of guidance, at least that I have been able to find, when it comes to determining close contacts for athletic activities. with the standard definition is 6 feet for 15 consecutive minutes. Some people may say a cumulative total of 15 minutes, but the definition that we've been using is 6 feet for 15 minutes, right? But we also look at that and say that really is not a sufficient definition for 2 wrestlers, right? And so if it's determined that a wrestler was asymptomatic in a meet, but did have COVID and could have been in their transmission period, we don't think to say, well, the meet didn't last 6 full minutes, that's really sufficient to say there was not close contact. And so in the absence of guidelines, we're going to do our level best to try to make a determination that isn't overbearing, that isn't overly sweeping, but is on the conservative side to say that, look, if we played a game and 1 or 2 of the individuals were actually potential asymptomatic spreaders, we're thinking that people who are in that game are going to be close contacts. And accordingly, they will end up being quarantined for a period of 2 weeks. And I really don't see how that can be avoided. And so our athletes and our parents have to realize that we are introducing at every level added risk when it comes to moving ahead with winter sports. Now, is it a manageable risk? Yes, I think it's a manageable risk. It's the board's decision to decide if it's an appropriate risk. But certainly, Mrs. Bushkowski, your point is a good one. It is conceivable that by virtue of someone's participation in sports, their ability to access education in person could be impaired for up to 2 weeks.
Well, or even other classmates that they may have gone to school with that day, or the day after, right. And then that classroom is being quarantined, and then possibly that teacher's, I'm just wondering at what point do we pause, or, I don't know. I guess administration has been doing an excellent job, in my opinion, and I'm going to trust that they will figure out some parameter, to keep everyone with the contact tracing and keep everyone as safe as possible.
Right.
And hopefully the teachers and staff will get vaccinated at the next level. Are they considered? I would imagine they're considered. At the next tier, correct?
Right. We're 1B, I think, in the playbook, if that makes any sense. And we're in there with law enforcement and first responders. Mm-hmm. And so, my hope is that it keeps progressing. And to your point about quarantining classrooms, because we remain in the hybrid model where we have good social distancing in the classroom and students are not in over a long period of time, we have not run, and we haven't been flawless. We have made a few mistakes along the way, but we have never had an instance where a positive case has resulted in the quarantining. Well, maybe we did once. We had one instance this year where the class was quarantined, a phys ed class actually, because of a positive case in the class. But by and large, our expectation is that if someone comes in with a positive case asymptomatically, that we would have no close contacts, and that once we learned of this, the individual would be quarantined and we would not have to quarantine anyone else. And by and large, we have been successful with that expectation. It's carried through.
Good.
Dr. Mann, Michelle Tierney, a couple more questions. I commend this proposal. I think this is excellent. I support winter sports, getting an opportunity to get started. I have done some research and gone out to different school districts, both private and public, and asked what's their success and failures with their sports. And I've been told that some schools have the ability to require every 2 weeks a negative test for their athletes to continue to compete. Is that a possibility for a public school system to ask of our athletes?
And, Mrs. Bushkowski sent me some information about self-tests there. We have not been able, apart from buying individual test packets, we have not, I think Illinois and another number of other states, right, have really done a better job in getting tests to public schools than we've seen here. Now, we're in our anecdotal observation, we are seeing quicker turnarounds for tests, but they're all after the fact. We have not had proactive testing in place, and I think we would need a little help, from the outside, some agency or some local medical provider that's been empowered to assist us, because I'm not sure that we have the capability or the expertise to implement a testing regimen in a way that we should. So in answer to your question, I think testing would be a very positive thing for us. But I've not seen any type of external resources that will allow us to be able to accomplish that. And I'm not aware of any public schools in our region that are actually, and I'd be interested if you could send me a note on any of them that are, because I think it could be helpful, but I don't see us having the expertise and resources and capacity to do it.
Mm-hmm. No, this was clearly a private, Wyoming SEM does this, and
Sure.
Yeah, so it was totally private school.
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, it's Rod. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I wanted to underscore one of the things you said earlier that I think is a really important differentiation from the fall. When fall sports were canceled, I know that I listened to the board meeting, I listened to you. One of the biggest concerns was the fear of transmission in the school. You had no idea, if a football player came and sat, or a soccer player came and sat next to somebody, is that going to, and they're positive, and they caught it on Saturday, is that going to cause?
Right. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And that fear, while you still have that fear always, right? I think it's a lot lower today and a lot more mitigated by the data today than it was in the fall. So that's, one point that I think is a real big difference here. And I've said this at a couple prior board meetings when we've talked about this. I really do believe that even though you cannot argue that we're increasing risk at a micro level for a specific athlete by letting them be in close contact in sports, there's no denying that. But I really believe that as a school board and as a school district, we have a responsibility to make the community safer. And I actually think that we'd be doing that if we let sport happen, because I do believe, I see it, my own kids are younger, but I see all the kids that I know that are in high school that are doing sports, and even the kids that are not doing sports. Sadly, one of the biggest reasons why we have so much transmission going on, not just in our community, but around the country, is the things that are happening because everybody's home and because kids are socializing and they're travel sports and they're doing all sorts of things. And if we have a controlled, not just sports, but activities and sports environment after school for a few hours every day with coaches that are following the regimens that we're going to have, I think that's a really, really big benefit for the community. And I think that cancels out some of the risk, the incremental risk that we're going to be taking. And I also think that by signing this promise agreement, is everybody going to follow it? Probably not. Unfortunately, probably not. But I think a lot of kids are, and maybe they all will. And if they do, and you eliminate a lot of those activities that are happening for the next 2 or 3 months, that has a real benefit for the potential spread. So, those are the couple of things I want to highlight. Obviously, I'm supportive. I've been supportive for a while of trying to get sports back. I know everybody has in spirit. And I just think that, we've asked these kids to sacrifice a lot, and we've asked everybody to sacrifice a lot, but, and I've said this to the board in some emails, but I just think that the time has come. We have to try and do this, and we can always stop, but if we don't try, we can't go back again. So you definitely have my support.
Okay. And again, there's a motion we could certainly discuss on the agenda. And if that's it for the winter sports, I'd like to finish the few topics that I did have listed there. It's brief. It won't be nearly as long, I don't think. But Keystone exams is our next topic. Keystone exams are end of year. Keystone exams are end of year course assessments, and they're given each year by the state. And I will say that of all, we do well in our standardized tests, but if there's one area where we truly excel, so our students do well on these Keystone exams. Mostly at the high school, a lot of our 8th graders take algebra, the algebra keystone. They really do well. As everyone is painfully aware, the 1920 academic year was abruptly shortened, and then keystone exams were not administered last spring. So if you were taking biology, for example, last year, your last day of school was in March. You know, we scrambled to get, you know, to do the best we could through the end of the year. But at the end of the year, the state did not, because of, you know, the lockdowns, allow students or have anyone take the exam in biology. Right now, administration, the state has said you could, as a school district, require someone who last took biology and was last in class last March, who's been taking courses through the year, to now take the biology keystone exam. Even though the requirement for graduation is waived for that exam, it is within our authority to require kids to take it, right? And you know, it's administrative, certainly my view, I speak for myself and all of our administrators, that, you know, we just don't exactly see any merit whatsoever in forcing that to occur. Any student who wants to take the exam, we would make a provision to make sure they could, but we do not see the value in mandating someone to take an exam for a course that they were last physically present for last March. We are hopeful, however, that exams will be given this spring. We want to take these exams. It will give us a measure to see how we're doing in hybrid. It will give our students an opportunity to show what they show, you know, the good things that they've been learning, and to demonstrate their aptitudes. But again, that's a different question than, you know, retroactively giving the exams. And the reason I raise this tonight is that these plans, as far as our approach, we're required to administration is required to let the board know what we're thinking, and obviously allow the board to wait, not allow, but, you know, the board will have its opportunity to weigh in on this topic. And so maybe I could just pause now. That's the only slide I have on keystone exams. And if there's any board members who have, you know, concerns or other thoughts, you know, we will certainly be prepared to adjust if necessary.
Dr. Mann, I do have some questions, not so much on keystone exams, but what types of assessments are we doing to try to determine where our students are in the educational process in terms of where they should be? You know,
right.
Where we have a problem, where aren't we? And you know, I sometimes fear that while we're all for athletics and we put a lot of energy into discussing that, we have very little discussion about the educational process in the district, and I'm a bit concerned about it.
Of course, Mr. Ackert, thank you for the question, because you know, really good things are happening. Probably the best job we do, and where our structures are most in place to do the type of assessment you're suggesting, is at our elementary levels. All right, and that is in large part because in recent years, in our efforts to overhaul the language arts curriculum, we have been putting in Ames Web Plus is the name of the thing, but on a regular basis, our students are taking benchmark assessments, and their progress and their growth are monitored very closely. Particularly our special education students, we engage in a process called progress monitoring, where we are regularly drawing data from all different types of sources, largely from these exams that are benchmarked against national percentile. So it's just not an internal thing that we're looking, we actually can see relative to a standard. And what we intend to do, and this process is ongoing. I think our special education director and her department have actually met with every single special education parent and family to talk about where students are now with respect to their progress monitoring, compare them to where they left off, you know, prior to last March. We're looking for discrepancies in growth, and then we're trying to develop plans to allow for, you know, supplemental services to be provided to try to gain back that lost ground. Now, the process, say in high school, is less articulated. We don't have all this benchmark testing. We do have a sense from our classroom teachers as far as their assessments that are ongoing. And it's why we are very supportive of any effort to take the Keystone exams in the spring, which gives us a sense. I mean, we know how we do in Keystone exams, which is really well. And our hope is that we would continue to do really well. But to the extent that we see that there are disparities, that again informs us as to where we start next year, how we leverage the skills that we have learned instructionally to bring people back up to speed next year, as we hope we are back in full. But this is a very, very important topic, and one that we're working on actually far more than sports. Even though we talk about it less, we actually are working on it far more. I will also tell you that we are implementing Wit and Wisdom in the online version. We're so disappointed that we couldn't do it for real in person, but we're gathering all kinds of data from the online Wit and Wisdom program that we have in place, and that will serve us well as we go into next year, fully in person, as we so desperately hope.
What's happening with PSSAs on a state level?
There is uncertainty as to whether they're going to give them or not. We hope they do, right? And by the spring, hopefully people are back or almost all back. There's exam security is a thing that they're trying to work through in Harrisburg, because if a third of students are virtual, how exactly that works as far as administering exams. So there are technical challenges that I'm glad to say we don't have to work on, because the state tells us how to administer the PSSAs. But at every turn, we have been supportive of PSSAs being administered, because that's, we need every measure to help us better understand what is happening to our students this year. And our sense is many are doing very well. Our staff is doing a great job, but there's perhaps a large segment of our student population that is really struggling, and we may need to make some very special efforts and adjustments next year to account for the challenges they're facing this year.
That I had Mr. Acker's exact questions. I am very concerned. I totally support your decision not to require the Keystone exams, but I am very concerned about how we are going to be able to measure the impact of this, of March through now, the impact on where the kids are, right, and how we're going to catch up.
Yes, and Mr. Michelle, I don't want to spoil a coming slide, right? But when we look down at the strategic plan, there are 3 goals. One of them is related to social emotional learning. And social emotional learning really boils down to, how do we identify and how do we best serve the students who need us the most? And the need is divided by many, many different aspects, including things like a big discussion is, students who have come up with having some real challenges in their life, trauma they're called, right? There's a lot of research from, Kaiser Prudente, big firms that are saying, these are things that you have to start addressing. And so, while we have, our goals are multifaceted in the school district, one of the 3 that we've boiled down to is to address those specific concerns. And it is our, one of our 3 top priorities as defined in our strategic plan, to try to address this very challenging, this vexing question, the one that we must answer for the kids who need us most.
And have our kids taken SATs this fall or last spring?
Many have not. As you know, we tried to be a site, and we ended up having some success there, but not nearly as many students have taken the SATs, and largely because many of the colleges are waiving the SATs this year as a need for admission. And so our data for SATs is going to be skewed. If I had a guess, I think our SAT scores will be even higher this year than before, because that smaller group of individuals who take the test are probably those who are most desirous of getting high scores, whereas those who, I'll give it a try, right, which is what we want. All right, our scores have been going up, great things, but if to the extent that that group who is somewhat ambivalent decides not to take it, you know, it actually might help the scores go up, right? So I speculate our scores will be up, but that doesn't mean that we've done better. So exactly what you're saying, we want to look at that data, look at participation rates, look at our actual scores, and see what we can learn from it. But the data will be skewed this year. It won't be as helpful as we hope.
Dr. Mann, Michelle Tierney, do we have any students this year that will be graduating with an associate's degree? And,
we do.
and how about our dual enrollment program?
Yes, our dual enrollment program is doing very well. I'm not going to say for sure, but let me get back to you on the associate degree. All right, and let's hope that we're all down here, 5,000 people handing out those degrees at Common Stadium, and a few associate degrees to go with it. But to your question, the Level Up program with Lackawanna is very strong. Lackawanna is one of the, I think, only 3 public schools in the state of Pennsylvania that are accepted in the credit transfer program for all of the public schools. So it's a very, very good institution we're working with. Those credits transfer very well. It's very well received at the high school, but maybe for our next meeting, I'll have an updated report on the specifics of how that's going.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on then to the strategic plan. The strategic plan was sent, it's posted on our website. I really have to thank, even if he's not here, I have to thank Dr. Wyant for his efforts. He really drove this process. Also, we want to thank the Comprehensive Planning Committee. These are the individuals who were on the committee who supported Dr. Wyant in his work. And particularly the community volunteers were very grateful for their participation. The meeting dates for this committee, you could see through the course of the year. And the process, you know, the process for strategic planning, we've said this in the past, is very scripted. It's preordained by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and the format of the strategic plan is very much a cookie cutter approach. So I don't mean to diminish the value of the plan, but you know, if we were to set out and do strategic planning without the need to fit it into this code, it probably would look different. But you know, certainly we think we're in a good place with the plan as it is. There are 3 goal areas, and again, this is not the only thing we're working on. There's a whole range of areas that we're approaching, but you know, big themes in the plan. As we said earlier tonight, we are so laser focused on language arts throughout the district. We've made great strides over the past 3 years in addressing some very legitimate concerns in our language arts program. I spoke earlier about social emotional learning. We think as we work more and more on this goal, we will become better and better in the services we provide to our kids. The board is well aware, and the board has supported our transition to hiring social workers and to approach the needs of our students from a different angle. And that effort, that the board has generously supported, is paying dividends every day in supporting some of the mental health needs of our students. And then finally, the language arts is K through 12, but a primary focus at the primary level. We want to engage in a conversation to say, how are our high school students, when they walk out our door, college and career ready, and what advantages, what opportunities are they walking out of Abington Heights with that perhaps in other places they aren't? Expanding the partnerships we have, such as the dual enrollment agreement with Lackawanna, is, those types of things are central, but also, being able to participate in meaningful academic coursework, to be able to come out of elementary school being an amazingly awesome reader, is very much part of this college and career readiness. I'll offer one example. Just this last year, our high school staff met with a team from Johnson College. We recognized that our students were very good at math in theory, but the application of math in the career and the trades was lacking. And so we worked to develop a technical math class that hits all of the major concepts in math, but is very much designed for practical application in the careers, and the hopes for our students who are going on to 2-year trainings or internships or apprenticeships will be able to apply that math better than before. So those are the types of things that make us very excited in trying to meet these main goal areas. This presentation will be posted. The link to the plan is there. The link is also posted on our website. And so then let me go back and wonder if there's any, and again, it's a big, long document, and we could have a continuing conversation about this, but I just wanted to roll this out for the board to give a little background.
I did have one question before you move on to the next thing on the Too Good for Drugs program. Is that something new?
It is. We've always had some form of anti-drug education. But if you remember, I think maybe a year or two ago, we partnered with Geisinger with a scientifically based, data-driven anti-drug program. We gather all kinds of data, and we're very encouraged. Our high school team, our middle school teams have been meeting with Geisinger, in trying to do staff development and understand how best to deliver the program. So, Mr. Brochalski, it is a new plan. It's a dynamic plan. It's being sponsored by Geisinger, who supports the cost of it and the data management of it. And again, we're very excited about being able to provide it.
I like the nickname. I think it's very. I saw it. I thought, oh, that's good.
Right.
We're doing something, trying something different, because I think that is one of the biggest problems that face that generation.
Yes. Yeah. We can't take credit for the name, though. I'm sorry to say. Okay. And then finally tonight, we have a motion on the board, on the agenda tonight, to ask the district stay within the Act 1 index. And so tonight, the board is asked to consider a motion limiting any tax increase in the 2021-22 budget to within the Act 1 index, which is high this year at 3.5%. The reason we would approve the motion allows the district to avoid the strict Act 1 timelines. And so if the board approves this tonight, we'll be able to produce budget documents based upon data rather than estimates, because we have to hit these timelines. Administration is continuing to plan a budget that does not contain a tax increase. And by voting for this doesn't mean anything other than it won't go above. But we certainly hope and expect to present a budget to the board that has a no tax increase for next year. And as far as our timing is concerned, there's a lot of uncertainty this year about subsidy and federal grants and federal programs and stimulus money. And so we would like to present the board with the preliminary budget in our March work session. We'll have an extensive presentation in March. The idea would be that we would vote on the preliminary budget later in March, and then between March and the end of June, we would update the budget with new data and information as it becomes available, with the hope that the board would approve the budget in its June meeting. And we always meet on the 4th Wednesday of the month in June for calendar purposes. Nothing of this is new. This is something we do almost every year. So are there any questions on the budget motion that we have on tonight? All right, and hopefully it's okay, the timeline that we have in place for March. I think if we do much sooner than that, the value of the budget will be diminished, because we really want data from the state and the federal government in a year that there's going to be a lot of uncertainties. Okay, and so Mr. Brochalski, that that concludes my presentation. I'm going to, if it's all right, stop sharing my screen, and then I could call up the agenda. If that's okay, we're okay to proceed. Oh, actually, we have public comment, so we will keep here.
Right.
And we'll do public comment. All
Okay.
right.
Time, if there is anyone from the public that wishes to address the board, just raise your hand. Please remember that you have 3 minutes, and please state your name and your address before you speak. And I see 2 hands raised so far. Dr. May, if you could allow John Lynott.
All righty. Okay, Mr. Lynott, I think you're here, although you might be muted.
Hey board, this is John Lynott. I live in Newton. I'm a physician at Geisinger. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm recommending moving forward with winter sports, and I really appreciate the discussion this evening. And I just wanted to add my 2 cents. The COVID data certainly is concerning, but as Mr. Mahan noted, the risk for children, particularly children and young adults, is the least risk. And associated with sports has shown to be, I think, not an increased significant risk. In addition, as Mr. Mahan mentioned, schools have been able to do sports safely. A lot of schools played fall sports without too much difficulty. And with our wrestling, a little plug for wrestling for the winter sports, the wrestling has a pretty detailed plan. And because of although it's intense contact, it's limited. We can track, I think, the wrestlers a little bit easier. You know, if a 106-pounder from Del Val were to have COVID, we would immediately know exactly who on our team contacted him, and it would really be limited to one person. And then usually that one person has another 1 or 2 in practice. The wrestling season is upcoming, and the kids are really looking forward to it. My son plays football and wrestles. He had to cover a game between Wyoming area and Lake Lehman with me as the physician, and he saw all of his buddies out there playing football. So a little disappointing, but he was very excited about the wrestling season. So I just wanted to mention that, note to you guys that kids need competition, they need school, they need sports, they need SATs, and I implore you guys to vote yes on moving forward with winter sports. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom Lavelle.
Okay, Mr. Lavelle, I think you're here.
Good evening.
Hi, Tom.
Hi there. On the topic of surveillance testing, which was discussed at some length this evening, although as stated, we are not alone in terms of public schools that don't conduct surveillance testing. And when I say surveillance testing, I'm referring to testing of pools and samples of individuals and populations within the school, whether or not they're symptomatic, just to ascertain whether we have a certain percentage of asymptomatic cases that are coming in and out of our doors on a daily basis. Of course, it was mentioned that our private schools are able to conduct such an operation. I know that similar operations take place regularly at the level of higher education. However, as was stated, we're not alone in terms of public schools within our county that do not conduct surveillance testing. However, we are alone in terms of districts in our county that insist upon some form of in-person learning during the highest surges in the spread of positive cases, the uptake in close contacts, and the most recent uptakes in both student and staff isolations and quarantines. So why then is the board simply willing to accept this lack of surveillance testing as a given within the Abington Heights School District? Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Brown.
Okay, Mrs. Brown.
Hello, this is James Brown.
Oh, yes, Mr. Brown.
I'm using my mom's computer tonight. As a captain of the wrestling team, I would like to say, first of all, thank you for your efforts and consideration. I sent a letter earlier today to the school board members, and I would like to read it tonight. It goes like this. Ladies and gentlemen of the Abington Heights School Board, I'm writing to you today to ask you to allow all winter sports to start and move forward with the season. While this in itself does pose some risk, there are so many more reasons why sports need to continue. Now, I am not going to read the whole thing just because I want to hit the main points. In the fall, you asked the students to trust you that you're making the best decision for us. Student athletes watched other schools try and make it work. We are asking you to try now. We are asking you to guide us and trust us. We understand the benefits. We understand the risks. We understand that to make this work, you will have to make many sacrifices. I am fully and completely prepared to make the commitment to wrestling and make the commitment to more socially responsibility. I will do everything I can to support my coach and help my teammates do the same. Please give us a chance and vote tonight to allow winter sports to compete. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, James. Melanie?
Okay, Mrs. Brock, I think you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is Melanie Brock. I'm from Clark Summit. I would like to first off say thank you so much for the consideration that you've given to sports and the time and the effort that you've put into the decision that you needed to make. I'd like to just make an appeal for the winter promise that you're having the kids sign, that maybe there could be an exception for the low contact sports, such as swimming. The club teams currently that are practicing have very safe protocols. There are very few kids in each lane. There's very few kids even allowed at the club team practices. And the club teams have been practicing all along with no episodes or problems. I'm just wondering if you would consider that the high school swim practice time has been reduced from 2 hours to just over an hour. They've had to split the team into 3 groups to get the practices in. So the swimmers are not getting the laps, the distance that they really need for competition. And if they are prohibited from swimming with their club team, that maybe there could be an extra swim time available to them in the later evening for the high school swimmers at our own pool. And of course, that would be up to the coaches and the athletic director, you know, how that would work out. But I'm just wondering if there might be a little bit more discussion for the low contact sport of swim. And of course, that could happen outside of a meeting like this. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brock. So Dr. Mann, that seems like something you could talk to.
Sure. And one of the reasons we don't have the winter promise ready to present to you tonight is that we're working through just issues like that. We recognize that it's not a cookie cutter approach, that people, and I'm not saying that we're going to agree to one thing or the other, but those are conversations that have to be had, for example, between the swim coach and the athletic director. So in the end, we come up with a document that is meaningful, that keeps people safe, but also isn't, unnecessarily restrictive.
Hey, Mike, could I just add something? I do think that it's important, if you're going to have a promise agreement and you're going to require the students to sign it, that there's a culture of compliance. And I think if you start making exceptions, and I believe me, my wife's a big swimmer, and I know how much time is required in the pool for these kids to get exceptional, and it is a big problem for them. I acknowledge that, but I would like to see us try to find a solution where they get more time in our own pool if that's possible. But
yes,
leave that to you.
Obviously, and again, making no commitments where it'll fall. We need to have those conversations and perhaps more time in the pool. The other thing, the poor coach is there forever as they're trying to extend these hours. So the conversation will be had, and we will be cognizant of consistency across the board, but recognizing if there are truly special circumstances that we would try to accommodate in whatever way we could without undermining the whole purpose of the thing in the first place.
Okay. Michael Siriani?
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Hello.
2 words could sum it up.
Sorry, can you just say your name and where you're from?
Yes, I apologize. My name is Michael Siriani.
Mhm.
I live at 303 Edgewood Drive South in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And you just said the 2 words that I wanted to say. Thank you. I know you haven't voted yet, but the tenor of the conversation seems to be very positive. And I don't want to be premature with my thank you, but I thank you for your consideration for voting yes on winter sports. And I'll say one final thing, and that's this. I know that you guys have seen my name because I've written to you on several occasions. And I just want to share that none of what I ever wrote was opinion. It was based on the medical literature and the statewide literature and the sports literature. And so I thank you for taking the time to read it. And a couple of people have written back to me, and a couple of people have written back to my 10th grade son. And so I thank you. And I'll say it out loud, Mr. Robson, or Robson, I'm not sure the pronunciation, Mr. Azar, thanks for writing back to my 10th grader. It made him feel understood. And it was special to see him smile this evening. Thank you kindly, all of you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night. Aaron B.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. This is Erin Bishop, and I'm in Clark Summit. And so I'm probably one of the very few that will bring this topic up. It seems like a lot of it is about sports tonight. But there's been a lot of talk about sports for the high school and the middle school, and no real discussion about the elementary students. And since I'm a parent of 2 elementary boys at Clark Summit Elementary, I feel like I should speak up for those who would like to be heard about that this evening. In a previous meeting, and I'll paraphrase Dr. Mahan, I'm not sure if you said you were either working on it or you had a plan that you felt would work to get the students back in 5 days a week. And so I had hopes that maybe that would be discussed. And then when it was brought up this evening about where we were with that, I feel like we're right back where we were at the beginning with no real plan to get them back because of staffing issues. You said tonight that there's little to no transmission from students to teachers. You made the plea back in the beginning of the semester before school started for substitute teachers. And I answered that plea. I went through the whole process, which was a long, drawn out, mostly frustrating sometimes process to become a substitute teacher. And, but I'm limited in how I can help you because the students are only in 2 days a week and my boys have to be home 3 days a week. I feel like if it was 5 days a week, you might not have as many problems with substitutes because I could help you more. And I'm sure that there's other substitutes that would feel the same way. Mr. Azar pointed out tonight with sports, you got to try. You can always go back if it doesn't work. If you see that there's high transmissions, you can always go back to not having sports or limiting to practices or to conditioning. So I guess my questions to you this evening are, what levels are you looking for or waiting on for the elementary students to be able to return 5 days a week? And what's being done to attempt to address the staffing issues that do seem to exist? We've heard that there have been staffing issues. I hear when I'm in the elementary school that new teachers are being hired all of the time. I'm just wondering, are we going to see an end to this staffing issue? Are we working towards a resolution of the staffing issues so that we can try to get them back 5 days a week? Or are we just waiting for the vaccine to come about and transmissions to go down? What's our end goal here? What's our goal to try to get them back? Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
I was just maybe offer a thought, right? I can say, in the presentation I made earlier, we had 122 individuals over the course of a 2-week period who were quarantined, 19, I think, positive tests, right? If tomorrow we brought students back 5 days per week, and students actually came back 5 days per week, my very strong feeling is that we would end up quarantining ourselves out of business, because we would not be able to maintain the 3 foot space, the 6 foot space, and the number of 122 would balloon to the point where we would be we still would have to close schools because of the attestation we signed about numbers of cases. And we would end up, while trying to do a good thing, closing down every one of our buildings, in my estimation, as I've watched this very closely. Now, once we have cases where we're not having, 8 or 9 issues per day of close contacts or positive cases, then we can talk about the idea of bringing students back, removing kids from virtual education. If our teachers have vaccinations, then it's very unlikely that we'll have them not able to come in and teaching from home, as so many of them are, because they find themselves as close contact. But right now, when we have 15 or 20 teachers who are teaching from home because of circumstances not through any fault of their own, we simply don't have the staff to bring kids back into the building 5 days per week. And there's no planning. We are trying to attract people, as you know. If the sub wants to come here, there's a spot for them to work. But saying that we'll have a plan and make it work is different than really the practical application of doing something that meaningfully increases the participation of students in our program. And I will tell you that at this point, to bring students back 5 days a week would have the exact opposite effect that we would hope to achieve.
Mike, have we given any thought to, when the day comes where where it appears as though we are going to be able to start talking about 5 days a week, have we given any thought to starting with the elementary first? I mean, because clearly it's the most challenging for parents and students at the elementary level to do virtual learning. That is, I think everybody would agree with that that's the most challenging. Not that everybody wants to be back, but have we talked about starting a gradual approach?
Right. And we have, and I think elementary would be a good place for us to start. I want to make the point that many of our students are in 4 days per week now because of whatever special circumstances that they're facing, and we're looking to try to expand the number of individuals who are in for 4 days per week. When we have teachers vaccinated and we have staff that are up to speed, we can make that transition. And it may be we can just do it all at once, not have to phase in, just develop separate plans for separate levels in the district. But we recognize having kids home is a problem. But I will also say, in our defense, if you look around, there are many, many districts that are home 100% of the time right now.
Right.
And we are managing at the moment to be able to do better than a lot of other places. And we want to stay ahead because we recognize this. And I hear the frustration, the voices of people who want us back 5 days per week. I count myself among you, but we have to do it in a way that's smart. And just that
will there be an issue with offering 5 days a week when you have some parents that might say, we don't want to go back, we want to stay virtual?
Well, right. And that's the thing, right? Because fewer and fewer of our parents right now have their kids in school, right? Even students who are enrolled in virtual, they're staying in hybrid rather, they're staying home, right? Because they don't want to come in. They didn't want to, put themselves at risk before traveling over the holiday. Many, many reasons, right? But if we say, well, let's just roll everybody in now, and then vaccines start to come, transmission goes down, we want to be able to accommodate as many needs as possible, right? And that comes at a cost, right? And so, and it comes with limitations in staffing that are just obvious and that are being experienced across the Commonwealth and across the nation right now. So, we're going to do this right, and we'll be ahead of the game. But right now, there's not an immediate path to get back, and it's not a path we'd want to go down if we could.
Hey, Mike, one question. I think we talked about this, maybe it was as long as a couple of months ago, but there's some classes. My kids are an example. One of my kids couldn't do this, but 2 of my 3 kids are in classes where it looks like they could go back 4 days a week because they're so small. And have you had discussions about, it sounds like you've had some discussions about incrementally rolling that out, not just to the kids that have special needs or that are in special situations, but my daughter's, fourth grade class has 5 kids on Monday, Tuesday, and 3 kids on Thursday, Friday. It sounds like you could do those. And that's just I know that's only like a mini step. Everybody wants to get back 5 days, but
right.
Are you talking about doing stuff like that?
It is, but here's the thing, right? There's 4 or 5 in the class now, right? But in 2 weeks, we can be back up to 16.
Yeah, right.
Right. And if we're up to 16 and we allowed 5 from the other section to come in, then our distancing is, see, we are trying to provide options to people.
Yep.
Right. But to allow kids, for example, to stay home for a while, if that's what they believe is their most comfortable approach. But once we start to do it, right now we'd be fine.
Yeah.
But 3 weeks from now, we would then say, well, you don't get to come, you do that. I mean, and that's the problem that we're facing. And I will also say, and I've spoken about this in the Mathematica study, the hybrid model we're using is designed to minimize internal transmission by allowing that time frame where we can go back and contact trace and minimize the time that a symptomatic kid could be, or asymptomatic kid could be in, or staff member could be in the building. So I will tell you, as frustrating as it is, our approach right now is working, given the amazingly high levels that no one would have thought we'd be in school at 3-something transmission rates and 13% positivity rates. But we're here and we're doing okay, but we have to be careful or else we're going to find ourselves, setting ourselves back rather than moving ourselves forward.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anybody, any other hands raised. Dr. Mann, I think we can move on with our agenda.
Let me get the agenda going here. Okay, are we able to see the agenda? No. All right. One quick moment here. Let me see. All right. Hopefully it's up there.
It is.
Okay, good. Good. And shall I read, Mrs. Brochalski, the motions? Are you able to hear me?
Oh, no. Did you want me to read them or are you going
no, I'm happy to read them. I'm wondering if it's all right if I should proceed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So under A, we ask the board to consider a motion authorizing administration to take all required action to prepare Abington Heights athletic teams to participate in the 2021 winter interscholastic sports season, tentatively scheduled to begin on January 21st, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Dr. Cadman?
No.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Madinsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mrs. Brochalski?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Okay. We ask the board to consider a motion to approve the first reading of the Abington Heights School District Strategic Plan as contained in item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Dr. Cadman?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Madinsky?
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mrs. Brochalski?
Yes.
9 yes.
Under letter C, we would ask the board to consider a motion to approve the E-rate grant support agreement with Lincoln Intermediate Unit as contained in item number 2.
So moved.
Second. On the question?
Jean Cadman, I looked at it briefly, but I really could not make heads or tails of it. So can you summarize it? It had something to do with computers or technology?
Yes, yes, Ms. Cat. There's a federal grant every year called E-rate grants, and it provides us with, and it's a very complicated federal program that has a lot of, there's a lot of complexity to the application in order to maximize the amount of grant money that you receive. Very often we're able to acquire funds for our internet service, to put routers in. Essentially, it supports the infrastructure related to our technology. And the intermediate unit, the Lincoln Intermediate Unit, provides services that allow for us to ensure that, number one, we have some help completing the grant, but also we do it in such a way as to maximize the amount of funding we receive for that grant. And that's the purpose of this proposal.
So are we paying for this, for their support?
We are, very definitely, yes.
Well, I couldn't find what it is we pay them.
Well, the billable rate hour, $100 an hour sounded pretty reasonable to me.
But we've been doing this, right?
Yes, we have. We have found they have some, very good expertise at this. They do this for many, many districts across the Commonwealth. It's kind of something that their intermediate unit does. And we found it to be very helpful. The fact is that our IT department is understaffed in the extreme. And while they would be certainly capable of doing this, they can't do it in all of the many other things that they're asked to do. And even if we could do it on our own, we probably would want this anyway, because the expertise that they offer maximizes the amount of the grant anyway. So it's a very good thing that's worked well for us in the past.
Okay, any other questions? Roll call.
Dr. Cadman,
Oh, you're muted, Jean.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Madinsky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
and Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
9 yes.
And we request the board to approve the settlement agreement between Abington Heights School District and student number 3X as contained in item number 3.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, on the question?
I have a question. I normally would like to have more discussion on these. So to have it before a work session, could I suggest that maybe in the future we have these cases during our public meeting during the middle of the month, so we can have executive session to discuss these a little bit more into depth?
Of course, right.
Yeah, that would be my only request.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I would say I would prefer it that way myself for sure, but the agreement also revolves around the provision of services for the student, and so we want to try to get this, rolling as soon as possible in light of the holiday and the delays.
Understood. Yep.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Madinsky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
No, I agree with the services that are going to be provided. I don't agree to the terms and conditions of the attorney's fees.
Okay. Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
okay, and Dr. Cadman.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, all right, and Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no.
And finally, we request the board to approve the Act 1 resolution as contained in item number 4.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Madinsky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes, this one has my full support.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
and Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
9 yes.
You know, Dr. Cadman, I think there was a time when you didn't want to vote for these because it wasn't a 0 automatically. You remember those days?
How can we forget?
Could we really have Mrs. Cadman even vote on these since we know what she's going to do anyway?
No, I kept saying, look, we can't put the 0 there. It's not the rule, but
I've learned I can wait for the 0.
that's it. That's it. So progress is being made. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called you on that, but I couldn't help it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, if I may. And then we do have that because it's a work session, just in case there might be others.
Another opportunity for the public to address the board if they like. If anybody else would like to address the board, you can raise your hand. I don't see any new hands raised. I think we have, those were the speakers from before,
Yeah,
correct?
right? Yep.
Okay. It looks as though we do not have any additional public speakers. And I don't see an old business, new business, but I think
I'd like to compliment administration for a fine job on the athletic issue.
Sure, I agree. Oh,
Yes, I'd like to spend a moment on the opportunity that we had a few weeks ago to go and do a ribbon cutting ceremony at our brand new track and field. It has been approximately 16 years for me and for the rest of this board that we have had this track and field on our wish list. And I commend administration. We have done and we have followed administration in taking every part of our facilities, every part of our buildings, and just stretching them to the max. And I commend Mr. Mirabelli and his team for working so incredibly hard on getting us this incredible new track and field for all of our community and our student population of all. And I'm just so proud that we have a new field and track for our athletes, for our students, for our marching band, for everyone in our community. So thank you all. It's been 16 years in coming, and it's nice to see that marked off on our wish list. Thank you.
You've been a driving force, to your credit, Mrs. Tierney, over those long 16 years.
Yeah.
So
Thank
yes, very nice. And
And
we'll have a
hopefully this
big,
spring will
Mrs.
be
Tierney,
all-
didn't you volunteer to sell balloons on the corner of State Street to raise money for this?
I did. But I have to say, we had a nice little pitching of the bocce ball, and Dr. Mann threw the first ball on the court. It was beautiful to see. So
I think he
commend
needs
all
to
of
work
us.
on he needs to work on his form, though, you know?
He does. He does. Yes.
in many different ways, Mr. Acker, many different ways.
Dr. Fauci throw?
No, I know my limits. I never would go overhand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well thank you for that, Mrs. Tierney. That is definitely worth mentioning. So, well, Happy New Year to everyone. It's 2021.
Thank you to the board. Happy.
Stay healthy.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy.
Yes,
And wear your mask.
absolutely. See you next